Oh my god, is it another thing on manipulation? Yeah, but this one is good. Welcome, guys, another episode of Practical Female Psychology. We are on episode 14, chapter 13, Female Manipulation. Quoting from the book here, women manipulate. It's as sure as the sun rising in the east. Manipulation occurs because of inferior physical strength and centuries of male domination. It's women's sole source of power, and they're generally very good at it. It helps them to feel like they're more of an equal footing than men, or with men, and manipulation is largely subconscious. Women saw their mothers doing it too. Again, there's the age-old argument, is it nature, is it nurture? And the answer is yes, no, and maybe. Don't worry too much about the how. Don't try to take apart the watch and see how things are working. Just use these general heuristics, which have usually either a sociological or a psychological background, and just apply the strategies in here to ensure that your relationships end up going a lot better. Now, there's a huge amount of subtopics in this one. So going through the list, we're going to talk about the double bind, A and B indecision, the bait and switch, ambushing, jealousy, rich descriptions, pouting and whining, and then we're going to end off with some practical advice. So let's get into it. The double bind. It's the good old, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. The example they use in here was the very simple, does this make my ass look fat conversation. Now, for the double blind, there's a couple criteria you have to meet in order for it to be effective from the female perspective. So these are the things to kind of watch out for from your perspective. 1, the victim of the double bind receives contradictory injunctions or emotional messages on different levels of communication. For example, love is expressed by words, while hate or detachment is expressed by nonverbal behavior. Or, a child is encouraged to speak freely, but is criticized or silenced whenever he actually does so. 2, no meta-communication is made possible. For example, it is not permissible to ask which of the two messages are valid or to describe the communication as making no sense. 3, the victim cannot leave the communication field. And 4, failing to fulfill the contradictory injunctions is punished by example by the withdrawal of love. Again, it's a very, very clever use of manipulation. This is a lot of the reasons why a lot of guys have standard red pill ideas, don't get married, which there's logistical reasons behind this, but I have a feeling that most guys are arguing it from the emotional side of things, where they don't like putting these double blinds because they just don't know how to deal with it. And it's not that hard. You just have to be aware of the strategies and keep your head about you and not fall for the emotional drivel. But that's the whole point of you guys being here. It's the whole point of the chapter. Moving on, they talk about the way these things tend to manifest within relationships. So as they describe, what will happen in such a case will be as follows. 1, contradictory injunctions. No matter what a man says within the woman's frame of understanding emotions, he loses. In fact, his attempt to even engage her on the topic in a logical manner demonstrates that he lacks the fundamental emotional skills. 2, no metacommunication is possible. Metacommunication is the psychological skill of analyzing and discussing different models of communication used between individuals. This skill is usually taken for granted among the psychologically healthy adults, but as the woman shuts down her possibility for off of the male, he will face her double bind without any chance of discussing its content with her. 3, the victim feels that he cannot leave the communication field. This is because the double bind causes the victim to invest ever-increasing amounts of psychological energy into the person delivering the double bind. When the double bind is used within the context of a romantic relationship, it assumes important biological and physical aspects. Human males are strongly driven towards the female by both visual sexual attraction and the need for affection. Therefore, when the woman uses the double bind, the man is usually not motivated to withdraw. Instead, he often becomes motivated to invest even more energy into the relationship. And 4, failing to fulfill the contradictory injunctions is punished, for example, by the withdrawal of love. Now, this is counterintuitive. Again, it's funny too. There's always these, and this is where frame is so important, and it never gets discussed well enough. Although it's really hard to describe it too, because in this thing here, frame, this is essentially a description of frame, but it's very hard to parse in some pithy marketing term to offer you guys some e-course. But Again, nothing you do is going to be right. You can't even ask to clarify the rules or say that the game makes no sense because, calling a girl overly emotional or whatever is making it bad. You can't leave the field because you're invested. Now, in this case, if you're in a relationship, obviously nexting a girl for trying to manipulate you is going to leave you a lot lonelier than you think. So learning to deal with it's a much better strategy over the long term. But all these things have a common thread amongst them. It's who has the frame in the relationship. In this case, this only works, like the girl allowing to set the rules, to judge when you're not doing it right. It only works if you put the girl as the source of judgment. Something that you want to adhere to. I'm going to defer to you. I'm going to explain it to you, rationalize it to you. All of this works because you're putting the woman in charge. And again, the most clever thing that everybody ever pulled was talking about this is what an equal relationship is. Again, equal relationships are only equal until they aren't. Some of us are more equal than others. And these kind of very, very codified manipulation techniques are the way to turn equal relationships into anything but. And they give you a little bit of information here later on in the book where they tell you about how to deal with this stuff. And I'll quote it here. The rule is that you must recognize that every double bind has some specific content, and then you must refuse to buy into frame set by the content. And another effective way to do this is to not get upset, but to accept her emotionally driven assertion and then use male logic in an impudent way. In other words, don't take her too seriously and poke fun. So for example, some women will react to the man's adept handling of the double bind with increased sexual desire. Women who are for one reason or another unconsciously suppressing their sexual receptiveness, and especially if they are seeking a provider, will simply cut their interaction with the man at this point. If you remember, we talked about people suppressing their desire in, I believe it was chapter 4 or 5, so you'll have to go back and see that if you don't recall. And then 3, women who are consciously trying to suppress their sexual attraction, perhaps because of political ideology or because they're seeking to extract money from the man, will either change their attitude and become friends or cut off their interaction. 3 outcomes there, and this is awesome because a lot of guys still engage too far when they mistake these different outcomes. So for example, you want 1. If you're a guy checking the field, dating, if you're got a bunch of plates and maybe you want to settle down and you're seeing if one of them is worth it, 1 is the answer you're looking for. You want to see increased sexual desire by not putting up with her nonsense. Does my ass look fat in these jeans? I don't really care to have this conversation. This conversation is over. Yeah, they're fat, whatever. Point is, by not treating her as the center of your world, not treating her as the source of validation, not treating her as your judge, you're going to get sexual desire back. And that shows you got a girl that's got not only desire for you, but she doesn't have a repressed sexuality that can come from all kinds of sources. And again, the kind of manipulative women that just want to make you their tier 3 subs on Twitter or Twitch for their hot tub streams, or just take your money from OnlyFans, like that crap. This is a good way to filter those out too. But here comes the problem. A lot of guys will get these things, they'll pass the double bind, and then they get reactions 2 or 3. Oh, well, she just stopped hanging around with me. What do I do? And then they try and re-engage. But they're totally missing the point. Right there, the medium is the message. By the girl not reacting with sexual desire, when you're breaking these double binds, it just shows there was no desire there, and it was pure manipulation for her own selfish ends. And a lot of guys were like, well, what do I do now? She won't talk to me. She hasn't called back. It's like, well, you never had what you thought you had, and you just basically made it honest. And by making it honest, she disengaged. So you did yourself a favor. Now, this isn't some cope, but this is literally how you're supposed to filter through women. You got to filter for ones that are high investment and filter out the ones that are low investment. Having said that, the political ideology types there that end up just becoming friends on this, these can work out for or against you. On one hand, you can get what's called a pivot. That's what they used to call it in the pickup things there. That just means a girl you can go out with and use her as pre-selection while your acquaintances, and use that to go hit on other girls. There's no sexual desire there, so it actually works really well. I've had that in my life. Girl, I used to have her as my roommate for like a year. She was the greatest wingman ever. The other alternative is you become an orbiter, and then you're the one she calls when she needs help moving or when she needs a ride home after spending the night over at Chad's place and he kicks her out at 6 a.m. Obviously, you want to be in one and not in the other. Girls don't like making decisions because with a decision comes the responsibility of being accountable to how that situation resolves. Now, if you don't know much about women, is that they absolutely cannot stand the idea of being held responsible for something going wrong. It's innate, it's hardwired, it'll get them kicked out of the cave tribe, so they just will avoid it whenever possible. Secondary benefit of this is by having this amount of indecision, you're essentially baiting further and further emotional investment from the man that you're with. And girls use this as a way to test the strength of the guy they're with. It's a test they kind of want to fail, but at the same time, if they're winning, free cash and prizes. Quoting here, AB indecision is one way a woman will test her man on his leadership skills. She can also use this to signal to him that she is officially turning over control to him, provided he is man enough to take it. The situation comes up when a woman feels insecure about the man's ability to lead, and then they use some examples of what it sounds like. The good example is like the classic one everybody knows. Hey, I'm hungry. Do you want to go eat? It's like, yeah, what do you want to eat? Oh, I don't know. What do you want? And then the first scenario they talk about as a poor but salvageable situation where you just keep going back and forth. I don't know. What do you want? I don't know. What do you want? And then finally, out of pure frustration, the guy's like, you know what? I'm going to go get a pizza. You can come join me if you want to. And the girl will probably hum and haw. And what they suggest here is just go. You've committed now. You got to commit to it. You go. Chances are she's probably going to put on her jacket at some point, stop complaining, and come with. If she doesn't, you still got to go. Let her sulk at home. And then you get home, bring her a piece. If she says she doesn't want it or that you didn't listen to her, just throw it out. She'll complain then, well, where's my food? How come I don't get to eat anything? And then you can make her qualify herself to get a bite of yours, or just be a cheeky bastard about it and go pick up her piece out of the garbage and hand it to her. Obviously, she won't eat it then, but yeah, the point's kind of made. And if that sounds like a lot of work, that's because it is, and you can avoid all of this stuff. The great example they use in here. Hey, I'm hungry. Do you want to go eat? Sure. What do you want to eat? Yeah, it's a surprise. Come on. Completely avoiding the entire situation, you can save a lot of mental energy that you could otherwise spend eating. I don't know. I think Franco, out of all these ones, this one drives him nuts the most. So, because I'll quote here, the bait and switch probably costs more grief than any other technique in a women's arsenal. Succinctly, the bait and switch is just what it sounds like. Offer something of value and then switch the valuable thing to a worthless thing once the hook is set. Women are very cognizant about this tactic. It has even been written up in Cosmo magazine as a surefire way to get a guy interested in a relationship. So how does it work? Simple. Do you ever know a guy that stated mournfully, my girl used to be so into trucks, camping, and beer before getting married, and now she gives me a huge chunk of shit whenever I want to do it? Well, that's basically it. Classic ones on this one. When you first start dating, the girl starts telling you, oh, I think I'm a little bisexual. And the guy's like, oh, that's awesome. That means threesomes. They get married, never even looks at another girl again. Well, that's the bait and switch. You like the San Francisco 49ers, and I don't know why you would, but whatever. Girl's a huge football fan. She loves it. Then you start settling down, and then she starts bitching every time the game's on. It's right there. Anytime you have an interest in something, she has an amazing interest in something, and then loses interest in something. It's a bait and switch. Now, we're going to have to disagree with Franco in this one in that it is a cognizant activity. It's partially cognizant, but it's partially subconscious as well. Same as breathing. You can control it, but generally it's going to happen whether you want it to or not. Borderline personality disorder is considered extreme woman, like a woman turned up to 12. Part of that involves latching on to the other person's identity. So part of this is if a girl is really into you, she actually does start to share interest with you have. So if you're a big fan of, on my second channel, watching a stream of Minecraft, she'll be a huge fan of watching a stream of Minecraft. If you're a huge fan of watching football on the weekends, she'll be a huge fan of watching football. It's not necessarily an act, although it can be. A lot of the times it's because the girl likes you, and the things that you like, she likes, because those all have this reinforcing cycle of creating genuine desire from the female perspective. So that's kind of the tricky part of this stuff. Everything kind of has a bit of a benefit to it, but also a bit of a detriment to it. And so you have to really navigate it with a little bit of nuance and some social savviness. But then again, that's why you're here. So Franco continues, this works so well because so many guys have this fantasy of women as dudes with tits. That is, they want the male-oriented companionship, but with a woman whom they can have sex with when they get horny instead of jerking off. We suspect that this fantasy runs very strong in men lacking normal socialization and possibly among many other otherwise normal men as well. Natural ladies men know better than this, understanding that women are best enjoyed for the unique, womanly charms and not to provide emotional validation equivalent to male bonding. It is important to note that the bait and switch is also a female test to detect weaker males or weaker male behavior. We have observed an increase in sexual desire in many females when the male is not affected by the mental power of the bait and switch. Therefore, it's a good business for a man to learn to deal with this stuff properly. And breaking the game is easy once you recognize it. Treat any excursion as a normal date and plan accordingly. They actually have a few techniques in here, which are really clever. The first one, make it as miserable as possible and make it very clear that you're loving every minute of it. If you want to have your thing, and Rollo has a great article on this one, Never Take a Woman Fishing. Go check it out if you want to after this one, where a lot of the time the guy needs his space away. He needs space to bond with other men. He needs space to reinforce his friendships with other guys, and bringing the girl there just ruins it because then she turns it into something about her. The idea there is she gets there, she wants to be comfortable, and because you love her so much and because she's so great, you start to bring low-income housing to the campsite. Problem is then, you've completely missed out on the point of it, and she's co-opted the entire male sexual strategy for her own sexual strategy. Not good. So, she wants to come camping? Sure, you guys are roughing it in the woods. Nothing but a hatchet and a piece of flint. It'll be absolutely miserable. I hate to say it, but this is actually one of the big reasons that the red pill in general has proved to be so effective when so many other male institutions are being crushed under the want for women to join. They've literally decided to make it so unpalatable for women that they just don't want to go. And then men can sit there by themselves and enjoy themselves in peace and learn sexual strategy. It's damn clever. Again, as much as I want to say it's the He-Man Woman Haters Club, it's just a facade to keep them out. And then inside we're just big softies. Of course, the other example is just to say, yeah, you'll take her along, and then just don't do it. God knows, most people in your life talk a lot of game but don't actually want to follow through, so sometimes just agreeing with her and then not doing it is the best solution, and it's just the easiest. Charles Bukowski, Jordan Peterson, Neil Strauss. I like these guys. Ambushing. This one, I mean, you've seen the Chris Rock sketch on the girl who wants to talk as soon as he gets to the door. Ambushing actually is kind of a bit pervasive, so it's worth its own section here in manipulation, because for a lot of married men, this is what causes that situation known as the man cave. Basically because they can't stand their family and they're being held hostage in their own home. So to go over it with a quote, a man works hard, maybe in a job he dislikes. The hardworking man commutes home, opens his door, wanting nothing more than a few minutes of peace and quiet. She's been waiting all day for the hardworking man's return, full of unspent emotion and lists of things for him to do. Her emotions must be dissipated immediately. The man must be put to work immediately. Remember the betaization process I talked about before? Putting him to work. Again, by this point, you've already got all the distraction stuff out of place. The hardworking man's stress level rises another notch, and as soon as the shoe crosses the threshold, she'll launch herself at him with a litany of complaints and incessant chatter about meaningless aspects of her eventful day. It doesn't sound like manipulation, but it is. A girl is socially stunted throughout the day, sometimes it's just she wants to invest in him. And again, that putting him to work, the betaization process. You start with testing the male, then getting him to open up to you, then putting him to work. All that work getting genuine desire in place and commitment, and now it's time to reap the benefits. And in this case, a way of reinforcing that is to inundate him with attention when he's at his weakest moment. Like, I get it, it's sending spreadsheets, you're not digging ditches, but at the same time, guys still have that mental shift where they have to go from work mode to play mode. This is why a lot of guys go out on a ton of business meetings. It's why a lot of guys end up having a few drinks with the buddies after work. It's why a lot of guys end up building a shed in the backyard and just hide out there. So, usually when these things come around, there's a couple predictable responses. We're going to go through them here. I think there's 4. The first one, guy gets angry with her. This will betaize him, although not as badly as could be expected under the alternatives. She will use his anger to try and make him feel guilty about treating her badly, and in worst case scenarios, she may use his reactions to try and demonstrate that he is mentally abusive or that he cannot control himself. Again, great reference for this, also in the Sidebar series, When I Say No, I Feel Guilty by Manuel Smith. Go through that one. It's great at assertiveness trading, and this is exactly what happens here. You're basically saying, no, I don't want my attention done. You do it with a tone that she doesn't appreciate, and then it becomes a big guilt trip. So again, learning to assert yourself with more nuance and more refined social savviness is going to help you in that situation. But number 2, start to qualify her about her demands. This move is totally betaizing. In this case, in order to achieve peace, you'll have to pay a heavy price, such as do favors and comply with their demands for attention. In this scenario, men who are often completely alpha at work end up in a completely beta position at home. Isn't it funny? It's like literally, this is so common. A lot of guys are just pillars of industry, absolute ball busters. As soon as they get home, all it takes is a little bit of nagging and some conversation to just whittle him down. Are we really as strong as we think we are if it's this easy? Number 3, abandon this territory and go hunting. This man will usually end up doing business all the time, or will spend a lot of time in the apartment of the other woman he has hunted. So yeah, a lot of the times it's just this. The other girl is just more fun and less of an emotional drain. And it's a lot of girls complain about guys cheating, but not a lot of girls go into the whole reason that it happens. A lot of the time, they could be perfectly pleasant, wonderful people, maybe they're still attractive, but just don't be a drain on the man's life. But again, it's instinct. It's hardwiring. You can't tell them not to do it any more than you can tell you to stop breathing. Like, you'll do it for a bit, but eventually you need some air. But, you know, that's why relationships just are the way they are. And I'd argue this is probably why a lot of them have a time on them. Start time, finish time. Just so much nagging could be had. And then number 4, become a tyrant. Now, as a man, you may feel that it is not fair or right to be able to relax in your own territory, your home, after you've done all you can for your family and your woman. Many men go through a difficult moral struggle on this point once they realize that being polite and considerate is not having any effect against the ambush. Now, it's true that a man should understand a female's need for communication, but that does not mean he should comply or forfeit the peace and quiet on his territory. Our policy has been to show the understanding of the female need for communication, but only when the process does not indicate an attempt at manipulation or an ambush against peace. And then they go into how communication is important. But yeah, the tyrant method, we actually had a much better term within the Married Red Pill. We call it being the benevolent dictator. And again, set your boundaries. If you want quiet time when you get home, demand quiet time. Better yet, command it. And if you don't get that, well then yeah, you pull your affection, you pull your attention, you pull your commitment. Now, to be fair, those other options pretty much do that exact same thing. Going out to get your mistress, going to hide in the shed. Those are all ways of like pulling your commitment. Getting angry, pulling your affection. So just remember, all these tools exist, but the point is you want to know why you're doing it and you want to be deliberate, because as soon as you let nature decide what's going to happen on this stuff, you're going to lose out. And you're going to end up that whipped man who ends up crushing it at Microsoft during the day and at night being told, I need to listen more, or you're just a horrible man. The next bunch are a bit rapid fire, a little slower, a little easier, so we can get through these ones with a lot less stress than we've already been going here. Jealousy. One especially common case you'll notice is that women will create for you mental images of competition with other men. For example, she'll often describe interaction in vague ways, such as you really start to wonder whether she has any sexual involvement, but are unable to logically conclude it either way. She'll usually do this subtly, even unconscious. And it's important to note that they're talking about mental images. These don't mean that the girl's cheating on you, although she may be, she may not be. They simply indicate that you've been hypnotized by the women's use of language, such as you find yourself in an altered mental state. It's a fun thing. I know you hear it a lot with guys on dates, and then the girl starts talking about how popular she is among the boys and how many guys want to message her, and how it's always about hinting that she could basically replace you. And the idea for that is it only works when you're worried about losing her. Easiest way to disarm this, using sex as a weapon, is just not to let it be a weapon. Girl wants to replace you? Well, fill your boots. I wish the next guy luck. In fact, one of our old moderators from the Married Red Pill, Bogey D6, started at the same time as me. Awesome guy. I've got nothing but kind words for him. He used to say when this kind of stuff came up, hey, if he can get you, I'll throw in the truck for free. Sometimes that's all it takes. If she wants to weaponize jealousy, fill your boots. I'm just not going to go for it. So rich descriptions, The purpose of rich descriptions in nature is linked to her need to manipulate her environment for the purpose of survival. By using them in conversations with the members of her social circle, and especially with you, she achieves the hypnotic effect of having those close to her support her aims. Remember how guys are very visual when it comes to sexuality and girls are very literary? Well, this is why. In the same way that we can get enamored by a nice set of jug space at us, girls understand that by using language and throwing a ton of words at the situation, you actually hypnotize people by using more words. That's why, so you remember on the rapport building phase, where you have to first get some attraction from a girl and then build up some sexual energy back in the pickup thing? Theory's still sound, I'm pretty sure. The idea is using more words is generally good. The longer conversation you can have, the more talking she gets to do, the more you guys will end up actually probably hooking up later or building a relationship, whether it's for a day or a year or a lifetime or whatever. Again, words matter, and the girl's ability to use rich language and to just run their mouths is almost hypnotic. So don't focus so much on the words themselves, but the underlying signal that the messages are carrying. In this case, don't look behind the curtain. They end off on pouting and whining. So pouting and whining, somewhat similar forms or somewhat softer forms of manipulation seen in mammals. For example, dogs and cats clearly whine, or a good case could be made that they also engage in pouting. But they both indicate a fundamental secession of authority, but they also represent a test of resolve. Whining comes from a place of weakness. Capitulating to whining comes from a weaker place, yet, so don't do it. Both pouting and whining are easily dealt with by teasing as well as appreciation, as it is important you do both at the same time. So what does he mean by this? In this case, there's a hard wiring in guys. When you hear a dog whining, when you hear a girl screaming, our actually adrenal gland starts going into overdrive and we start getting into fight or flight mode. So we have a natural proclivity being manipulated by pouting and whining. Pouting, whining, screaming, all the works. Girls know this. That's why if you're in a fight, girls are drunk, they like to scream and scream and scream because it gets guys all riled up into their defense. Realize when she's doing this, the good part of it is a submission. She's deferring to your authority, and that's a good thing. And again, that's how ego kind of gets to a guy too. Well, she's deferring to me. This is genuine desire. I better do everything she wants to keep this good emotion going. It's like, yeah, slow down. It's a term called topping from the bottom. And a lot of times the girls realize if they play weak and defenseless, that they can get guys to do basically anything. And that's why you see on TikTok or social media or among your friends or wherever you are, girls are constantly leading with how victimized they are, how bad they are. They brag about stuff that a guy you would never think of doing, like bragging about being on SSRIs, bragging about having a drinking problem, bragging about crying all the time, all these weird things. And they always think, why are women trying to make themselves sound so pathetic? But it's not pathetic. It's actually very clever. By doing that, you get the confidence to assume A, that girl really has it in for you because she thinks you're a leader and she's submissive, and B, she will tap into your ego need to be the alpha male to get you to do stuff. So again, playful teasing, don't take it too seriously. When a girl cries, don't feel bad. When she gets mad, don't get angry. And when she gets submissive, don't be a wuss. So they end off on practical advice, and granted, throughout each section here, they've already given a little bit of practical advice here, a little bit there, but I like how they ended off with some overarching points. In this case, only apply your male logic to situations with a clear train of causality, such as physical situations where A and B are clearly the result of each other. For example, not paying bills results in calls from the collection agency, no matter what her feelings might be. And 2, as a man, you must be completely unengaged in the outcome. You must not care at all what she thinks or says about the situation. If she displays an emotional outburst to deflect her feelings or absolve herself from blame, you must absolutely retain your composure. In these situations, her opinion simply does not matter. Let her dissipate her emotions first, and then you can engage her rationally. Now, I don't know if I had the video out on this yet, or it's in one of my scripts that I've been sitting around there, but I call it the 8-hour rule. And this is usually when you're having a heated discussion within the relationship. Usually it's over something big like money or childcare or any of those kind of situations. What happens is a lot of girls, like you make the good point, finances go here, house will be perfect, everybody wins. She gets emotional about it. And guys usually have 2 responses: to get angry because she's not going on board with her own self-interests, or they acquiesce and hope to like win her over through argument and validation. Sometimes you just gotta let the shit simmer. Say the things, she gets emotional, go do your thing. Next morning, give her a chance to sleep, and she'll probably wake up and see your side of things. And if not, well, then there's another conversation to have. But patience is sometimes a really good, rewarding virtue. And with all of these manipulation strategies, don't forget patience in your toolkit, because, again, her opinion doesn't matter on these things. You're making sure that your ass is covered regardless. So, whatever emotional process she needs to do to process this and be okay with it and realize it's not her fault and it's somebody else's fault and no need to blame her, then yeah, you'll be fine. So on that note, hope you guys enjoyed this one. Again, this, out of all the chapters in Practical Female Psychology, this is the one that's probably the densest. I mean, it hits point to point to point, and I summed it up as best I could, but I guarantee you, there's at least 5 times as much information in there as what I can impart on any length of a video. So if you're not reading this yourself while you're going along with these, you're really doing yourself a disservice, and you're only getting about half of what you need to succeed. On that note, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Cheers.